So in the last session, we talked about like how do we sign up on AWS? What is AWS? Basically, the free tier that AWS provides, and managing your billings. Like that is the most important part of AWS, so that you are not charged too much without your information, right? So today's session will begin with like understanding what is AWS account, root user, and why we should use IAM users. So let's go to AWS, the console. So basically, AWS account root user is the same user that we signed up with our email address and password, right? At the time of sign up. This account has complete access to all the AWS services and the resources in your account. So basically, if I go into my AWS account and I try to sign in, and if I sign in using my, okay, I'm already logged in, but I'll just show, right? What is the root user? Just a minute. So if we log back in, yeah. So selecting the root user over here and just adding your email address and your password for. So this is your root user. So as you know, like the root user is the like super user of your account. This user will have the access to everything, like your cards, billing, and every service, like every service that we see over here. So I can use any one of them, right? So it's highly risky to use your root user, right? So AWS recommends that you should not use your root user for everyday tasks because it is highly risky. Why? Because if this account is with someone else, they can misuse it, or by mistakenly they might create some things which you will be charged for, or they might delete your account, or they might do other bad stuff with your account. So what AWS officially recommends is that you should create IAM users and then lock your root users credentials away. So anybody is aware of IAM users? What are IAM users? Anybody has used them before or not? Okay. So basically, yeah, Abhishek, you want to say anything? Hmm. Okay, yeah, that's right. So using the root user is risky. Why? Because you may end up doing some bad stuff. And second thing is that suppose you are working in a big company, for example, let's say Facebook. So if Mark Zuckerberg has signed up for AWS, so he cannot just give his own credentials to his development team, right? We need some way that I can work under your AWS account without you sharing me your root credentials. So that's what AWS IAM for. IAM stands for Identity and Access Management. So this is just like in Windows, like or in any operating system, you can create multiple user accounts that can use the same operating system, but they all have different permissions. They all have their own set of area that they can work on. Similar thing is the IAM. You can go to IAM just by searching over here when you do it. So we can access IAM from here. Right. So let's learn something about IAM. So it is an AWS service. So it's a service. Okay. So all of these things are also services which you see over here. With all these services, again, IAM is also another one of the services that AWS offers. Right. This service is used to grant access to your AWS services, like other AWS services. So my IAM user, if you create an IAM user, so you can grant me permission to work with one of these services or multiple services. Right. Okay. for every IAM account that we create, we can control which services and resources this IAM account has access to. So basically, what are services? Services are these AWS services that we are mentioning. What are resources? Resources is that suppose in EC2, EC2 are the virtual computers that we can create in the cloud. So suppose you have 10 EC2, so you may only want me to access one of your EC2 servers, not all of them. So services are what AWS provides us, and resources are what we create out of the services. So we can configure that, and I'll show you in a while like how to create them. One more thing, IAM service is free to use. Like not all the services of AWS are free, but IAM is a service which is free to use. The only way that we can be charged is if my IAM user is consuming other AWS services. So basically, IAM service can be used to access other AWS services. So IAM itself is not costing anything, but yes, if we are using IAM user to access some other service, then we will be charged for that. So what benefits do we have by using IAM? First thing is that you can provide access to your AWS account with other users, right? So you don't need to share your root user credentials with them. You create an IAM user for them and they can access your account without your credentials, right? Okay, that's first. Then control the permissions that they have. So with IAM, you can grant different permissions to different people for different resources. For example, suppose you have a big company and in your company you have some accounts user. Accounts, you can say these are billing users who manages your payments, billings, that account section, we can say that, the account team. So you can create an IAM user for them so that they can have read and write access to the billing dashboard so that they can manage the payments and they don't need access to any other service. Right. Then you suppose you have a DevOps team. So for DevOps team, you can create DevOps users that have read and write access to whatever services that they require. Let's say then you have a developer team that need read-only access to Amazon S3 and Amazon EC2. So you can configure that. I'll show you just in a while. Right. And the third benefit of using IAM account is that there are a lot of AWS services that you would need in your programs. Right. I'll show you the demo of that. So for programmatic access also, you need AWS IAM accounts. For example, you can create an IAM user that has access to Amazon SES. So SES is a service used to send emails using Amazon. So you can create an IAM account that has access to Amazon SES, and this account can be used in your application. Like if you are a backend developer, so you might be using some integrations like Twilio, Stripe, or Amazon SES also. So to access the Amazon SES, you need to create an IAM user and then you can embed that IAM user into your program. I'll show you the example of that, right? Okay. So yeah, that's it. So now let's jump to the practical thing of it. So you can go to your management console and you can just simply search for IAM and you can land up in the IAM service. So when you come here, you will see a brief summary of your whole account. Like I don't have any IAM user right now. I don't have any IAM group right now. There are 2 roles if you see over here, but these 2 roles are not created by me. These are already created by AWS. But yeah, we can create our own roles. Right. Okay. So let's add our user. So as Amazon suggests that you should not create, like you should not use your root user every day. The only time you should use your root user is to create the first IAM user. So that's what I'm going to do. I'll create a user which is separate from my root user. So suppose I can give it a name. Let's say varun.kumar.admin. I can do that, right? So what permissions do I have? Do I need programmatic access? No. Do I need to access your console? So this is the console is basically this, what we are seeing over here, the dashboard that we see. So yes, I need to add a user into my AWS account, and the access type is like he can access using the management console. So yes. Do you want to create a password for them? No. If no, then it will be auto generated by AWS. Do you require that on first login? Do they need to change their password? If yes, so you can take it up, or otherwise you can block. Then what permissions will this IAM user will have? So next step will be to show them the permissions. The one way of setting the permission is that adding a group. Like you can create some groups and you can tag this user in that group. So all the users in that group will have the same permissions. An example of group will be like creating DevOps group over here. And suppose if your DevOps team has 5 users, so you don't need to you just need to tag them into your groups. So let's create a group from here. You can either create a group from here also, or you can just go to the IAM dashboard, and on the left hand side you will see a navigation where you can do it. But okay, let's not do it right now. I'll do that, but just in a while. Or if you already have a existing user, you can copy their permissions and you can manually attach the policies. So basically Amazon provides you all of these possibilities, like what this user can do. So basically, because of a large number of services that AWS has, again, AWS policy, IAM policies are also huge. Like suppose this is the administrator access, like that. If you have this admin access, you can do anything. Let's suppose I'm going to create this admin access profile for me. Then tags. I'll not discuss tags right now, but I'll tell you afterwards. These tags are basically your user defined metrics. Why do you need to tag them? I mean, you can tag them so that you can filter out in billing dashboard, or you can search out later. But it's not important, so I'm not discussing tags over here. So the username will be this. What type of access does it has? This user will have the access to the console. What kind of password do we have? It is auto generated, so Amazon will auto generate for me. And what kind of permissions do I have? I have the whole administrator access. And because I ticked up like I need to change my account password, so Amazon is also tagging me with this policy that I need to IAM user change password. So whenever I log in for the first time, I will be forced to change my password. So if I create this user now, so we will see, okay, this is successful. This is the username and this is the password. So this is the auto generated password which I am copying right now. So how do I use it? So Amazon provides us with this unique URL. So let me just copy this thing, or instead of copying, you can just download the CSV file. Amazon will provide you all the credentials in a CSV file. The thing is that this password is only visible to me only once. So if I close this window right now, I won't be able to see this password again. So it's very useful that you should download this CSV file. If you don't download this file, again you can reset the password, but that's what. Okay, so if you see this line, this is the last time these credentials will be available to download. However, you can create new credentials. So okay, I have my credentials now. So how do I use it? So if I go to IAM, so now we have one user over here, which is this user, right? This is the user. What user is it? You can just go over here and you can see what users are we having. So if I see, this is my CSV record that I was having. So let me open this. So yeah, this is my username and this is my password and this is my login URL. So Amazon also creates a login URL for me. So if I go to this login URL, hit enter, so it will redirect me to the login screen. But this time the login screen will be something different. I'll show you. Yeah, if you see now, this is somewhat different from what I just logged in the beginning of the session, right? It is having my account ID. Account ID is what? Account ID. So whenever I create my Amazon account, I am given an account ID. So this is my account ID, and this is exactly what we see here. This is my account ID, and what is my username? Sorry, my username is this, and password is this. This is my password. If you don't know how, if you don't want to use this URL, what you can do is that you can just go to Amazon AWS, the home website, and go to Amazon Management Console. Over here, it will ask you to log in. So while you are on the login screen, okay, it has my session. So I am going to close my incognito window and again open my incognito window, just to show how we can do it, because not everybody will be wanting to use this URL. So yeah. So while you're on the login screen, you will choose IAM user, that you are the IAM user over here. Then you need to provide the account ID. Account ID is this one. Otherwise, if you don't have this, you can ask your admin, whosoever has created your IAM user. You can ask them what is the account ID. So they will give you the account ID. Next, yeah, again it will ask for this thing. Yeah. So this is my username and this is my password. And I can log in now. So now my AWS account has two users now. First is this root user which I am logged in through, and I have created my IAM account, which is an administrator. So I don't need to use my root user. I can just log out and forget using this, and I can use the IAM user. Now, just as we configured in the IAM that I need to change my password. So yes, it will prompt me to change my password for the first time. So this is my old password and this is my new password. And confirm change. And okay, now I am able to log in into this particular user. Okay, I think this is clear, right? Any questions still here? So I've created two users. First is already created because I signed up, and this is the second one. And again, I can use all the services that I have provided. Okay, that's there. Okay. Now suppose this particular user has forgotten their login credential. So what you can do, you can you can go inside the users thing. You can click the username and you can change their password manually yourself from the root user. So if you manage this, you can provide a custom password just in case that particular user has forgotten their password. So you, being the root user, you can reset their password. And again, you can ask them to reset your password whenever they log in the next time. Okay, yeah. Any doubt? Mm-hmm. Yes, they can. You just need to have that administrator access. If you have that, so using an IAM user, you can create more IAM users. That's possible. Okay, so you can just, if you want to delete this user, so that's a very simple functionality. You can self-understand it whenever you are in the IAM console. So what permissions does this have? If in future this particular user require more permission, you can add a permission. If you want to remove this permission, you can just click over here and remove his permissions. what groups this user is attached to. So right now we don't have any group, but I'll create a group and then we will see what are groups meant for. So you can reset their password from here. If they need to access using SSH, so you can add their access keys over here, SSH keys. So these are like, I'll not go deep into this stuff because it's not the part of this discussion, but you can configure everything about this user, right? Okay, so let's come to the groups. So suppose now you have a front end group. Suppose I have a company and I have a front end developer. So I can create a group for them so that I don't have to manually assign them all the permissions all the time. I'll set up all the permissions in this group and I'll tag that user into that group so that they will inherit all those permissions automatically. So suppose I have developers and I have front end developers. So I can create a group for them. So next step, so it will ask me what kind of policy do they have. Like all of these services. So every service that you see over here, let's say Amazon Polly. Amazon Polly is a service which turns text into lifelike speech. So basically you can provide a text and it will give you a speech output. Right. So suppose if you want to give them Polly access, so you can search for Polly, Amazon Polly. So it will give you the what kind of permissions Amazon provides for that. Okay, so you can just tick the services that you want them to have. Suppose along with Polly, I need to provide them access to CloudFront. So CloudFront basically is here. Yeah, so basically this is the CDN. CDN we will discuss like what is a CDN in. So that is something related to the front end. So suppose I need to provide them the access to the CDN and suppose to S3. So I can just come over here and S3. Okay. So these are the three policies that I wanted the front end users to access. I can go next step. So it will confirm, like it will show me the review, like, okay, you are providing these three things. Amazon Polly, you are providing them access, CloudFront and Amazon S3. If I'm okay with it, okay, I'll create a group. Okay, so here is my first group. It does not have any users yet, but yes, the group has been created. Right. Again, you can just tick this up and you can delete this group, add users to this group, edit group name, or yeah, if you click this name, so you can modify the what permissions do you have. So you have these. So again, you can remove the policy, or you can add more policies over here. Now these policies are predefined by Amazon, right? If I go to Amazon, let's say S3. S3 is the storage file, like for file storage, Amazon is S3. So whenever you upload, if you want to upload your file, if you want to store your video somewhere, so Amazon S3 is the place where you can put all your user related data. So Amazon provides you S3 related policies over here by default. But suppose if you don't want to, if you are not satisfied with the Amazon full access, I mean you want access to some resources but not all the things. So you can create your own policies also. So these are your custom policies that you can create. Okay, so how to create a policy? You need to first select a service, like which service are you looking for. So you can choose a service like S3. I'm looking for S3. Okay, what actions do you want them? So all S3 actions, so everything will be provided in S3. Suppose you don't want to provide all the things. Suppose you only want to provide, let's say, put object. So put object is used to put files on your S3. And if you want to provide them access to put object and let's say one more object, let's say delete object. So the user can add an object to your bucket like S3 and they can delete the objects from your S3. Suppose only these two things you want them to have, right? Nothing else. Then you can also manage out of all the resources. So just a second, I'll explain. So let's go to S3. So I'm here in my S3 console. So right now I'll not have any S3 bucket over here, but I can create a bucket, a very simple one. So okay, we'll come to S3 also in details, but not in this session. So I'll be fast forwarding it to just to create a bucket. So suppose I have a bucket over here and I have one more bucket. Let's say production bucket. So I have two S3 buckets with me. Now when I'm creating my policy, I can also precisely define that I only want to provide access to this bucket, not that bucket, or this bucket, or both the buckets. So the first thing was to select your service. Second thing was to select the actions that you want on that service. Like, so I selected only on the right, I selected put object and delete object service. If more services are required, so again you can just tick them up, whatever things you want. Then third, resources. What resources do you want? Right? Services what Amazon offers, and resources are what we create. So these are my resources, and Amazon S3 is my service. So with service, if all the resources, so I can choose them, like I want to give access to all, or if you only want to specify only some of the services, so you can provide a specific names. So how do you provide a specific name? You provide ARN. So what is ARN? So basically ARN is Amazon resource name. So just like you have URL. So URL means uniform resource locator, which tells you like, okay, everything has a unique name in the internet. So the same things happen with ARN. So ARN is basically Amazon resource name. So this is how Amazon uniquely identify everything. Right. So this is something related to URL. So suppose I want to provide access to this bucket. So I'll tick this up and copy URN. So whenever I copy this ARN. ARN. So I can specify. So if you want to provide access to a bucket, so you can add this bucket over here. Right. So you can paste it over here and add. So this step gave me the access that, okay, using this policy, if I attach a user to this policy, so it will have access to this bucket. Right. I think this is clear, right? Any confusion still now? Everybody is clear, right? Yeah. Okay. If anybody has questions, so just let me know of them. Okay. I'll stop over there and we can discuss it again. So I'm providing the access to bucket. Okay, this is for S3. So suppose again I want to add one more permission. So I'll choose a service. Let's say database. For database, Amazon has RDS. RDS is what? Okay, Amazon is relational database service. So basically, this is a database service provided by by Amazon. So okay, in RDS, what do you want to do? Okay, I want to provide them write access. What write access? I want to provide. So these are all the actions that they can do. So you can customize everything, whatever you want to do. Okay, this and this. I'm randomly selected anything. Then again, which resources you want to do. If you have your specific RDS, you can add the ARN for that RDS. Or if you want all the RDS, you can select all the resources. And you can finally review your policy. So you need to now give your policy name, front end custom policy 1. Okay, you can describe it, whatever. RDS and S3. Right, okay. So it's giving me the summary of everything and I can create my own custom policy. Okay, I cannot use and over here. So, okay. So I can create my custom policy also. So using IAM, so now I think by now you might have got the idea like how powerful IAM is. You can precisely control how many users you have, what access do they have, and not just which services they can access. Inside services, which resources they can access, you can also precisely control that. Okay, now suppose I am adding one more user now. Let's say for Varun Gupta. Okay, again I'll choose AWS Management Access Console. This is fine. Now permissions. So now I can attach this user to a group. So now you will see I have a group. So either I can attach it to a group and all the permissions that this group has, I'll inherit them. Or I can copy my permissions from my earlier user, or I can attach my policies. So these are the Amazon defined policies. And if you filter up by custom manage, so this is the policy that we created. So I can attach it with this policy, and I can attach one person with multiple policies at a single time. So I can also attach him for Alexa again. So yeah, then yeah, we can select next, and okay, so this will be the Varun, the name. I will be given access to Amazon console, management console, what policies I have, my custom policy, and this because I forced myself to change my password. So again I have created one more user. Again I can download the CSV, and I can again after that. So now I have 3 accounts, one root user and 2 these accounts. So I think this is clear, right? So let's get back over here. So what are the benefits of IAM? Is that firstly is that you can provide access to your AWS account without compromising, without giving them your root credentials, and you can provide them the granular permissions that you want, right? And giving them and the third point, now we will discuss the third point, which is like not only users need access to your AWS account, even your applications like your front end application or your back end application need to access your AWS account to work. So for example, I have, as a client project of mine, I'm working on a project like Thought is my project. So what happens in this website, we have a sign up page. So on that sign up page, whenever I sign up, I need to trigger an email to that particular signed up user. Okay, I think my internet is running slow, but okay, this will load up soon. Okay, let's just see over here. So to send email, Amazon has Amazon SES. So what we have done is that this application needs access to Amazon SES. So I need some way to provide my application access to Amazon SES. So that's how we can achieve using IAM. So I can create another user. Let's say SES console, like program user. And this time I will select programmatic access. Okay. So that I can use Amazon SDK or I can use Amazon APIs to access Amazon S3. So this time this user will be having a programmatic access. So programmatic access users cannot log in the management console. They will be given a key ID and a key secret. Just like every other API that you have integrated so far, you might have seen like all the APIs provide you one or two credentials like key or secret. So similarly, Amazon will provide me a key and key ID and a secret. So permissions. So I'll search for permissions. What permissions? I'll search for Amazon SES. So yes, okay. I want to provide Amazon SES service. Okay, done. So next. Okay, this is fine. Now creating this user. Now when I do that, again it will give me a CSV file. Now you see, like on previously Amazon was providing me password. Now it is not providing me the password because this is a programmatic access. So password was required for management console users. For programmatic access, it will provide me two things: key ID and secret, which I can again download using my CSV file. So you can download them, and so let me show you. So let's take Shakir. Shakir, what is your email address? Full email address. uddin@crownstack.com. Okay. What's your, okay, I can put in any number, so I'll put any number. Your password is password. Okay, any name that we can provide. Now I'm creating your account. What will happen now when I'm submitting your this thing na? So my program, like the API, wants to send you an email. So if you check your inbox, so you will receive an email from this website, right? And this is the email that you have got. So welcome to Tuxedo Thought, your name, and now you can log in into the Thought admin. Okay, now if we see this header, this file, so we will see, okay, this email has been sent using, okay, where is it? It's not coming on my side. Shagir, okay, okay, 1 minute. See original. Yeah, here it is. So if we see, yeah, okay, we are sending this email using Amazon SES. Why? Because on the backend side of this project, I have integrated Amazon SES. So this is the backend of that particular project which we are having. So this is the API project over here. So in this project, we have email service. In this email service, we have configured everything, and to send the email, we have configured the username and password. So these are basically the Amazon IAM credentials that I was just showing sometime below. Like this is the access. Okay, so this is another user, but the key ID is my username, and the the access key, the second part of my credential is my password. So when I provide this, so my application, my backend application can access Amazon SES from my AWS account. So this is totally programmatic access. So that's why. So I think, that's what I wanted to explain. So again, we are using Amazon S3 also. For Amazon S3, I have created my one more IAM user for Amazon S3. Then for Amazon Comprehend. So in this project, I am also using Amazon Comprehend. So again, I have created one more IAM user for this thing. So all these credentials are being used in my program, and I coded my program to use this thing. Okay, that was the third point, which is allowing programmatic access for applications to use AWS services. So we can create IAM users to be integrated inside applications to use AWS resources. For example, creating an IAM user that has access to Amazon SES that we just saw a demo of, right? To send transaction emails from the application. Using this IAM account, your application will be able to send programmatic emails to customers. Okay, and just a reference link I have added. So I'll be sharing this PPT with all of you so that after this session we can see this, right? So you can study more about IAM by looking into this page. So what AWS services work with IAM? So not every AWS service work with IAM. like billing will not work over here, and so there are some services that will not work with IAM. So all the services that work with IAM, so they have listed down all the services that, so you can find out your service whatever you want to use, like Comprehend. I can use Amazon Comprehend, I can use S3, and I can use Amazon SES. So these are, so you can check this out in your free time, so to get more detailed information about this. Okay, so that's where, yeah. So just a diagram like IAM. What are the possible ways we can access IAM accounts? So basically, an IAM account when created, we can use it in the Amazon Management Console, our Amazon Management Console, for browser-based manual access, or you can use Amazon command line interface. I'll show you. So I've added this link over here. So Amazon provides their own CLI. So by CLI, just an example. So if you all work with Git, right? So Git is a command line interface. So again, so Amazon also provides their own command line interface, so that you can write your shell scripts. You can use Jenkins to trigger AWS commands. So for shell scripting things, you can use Amazon command line interface. I've added the link over here, and if you want to learn more about it, you can come over here and you can see this thing. Right. And the third thing is to use Amazon SDK. So what are Amazon SDK? That's very simple. Every one of us might have used Amazon like some SDKs in future, like in past. Like, so SDKs are like predefined classes, predefined libraries provided by Amazon. Then we can use for PHP, Node.js, JavaScript, Golang, Python, Ruby on Rails. So they have SDK for everything. So you can integrate with their SDK, and inside the SDK, you need to use the IAM credentials to make that SDK run. Right. Just an example. So I'm using Amazon Comprehend in my project, and this is where I've written the code for my Amazon Comprehend. So if you see that I'm creating a Comprehend instance, like I'm creating an instance of Amazon Comprehend. So it is asking me the AWS credentials. What are these AWS credentials? It is my key ID and my access key, right, which we created in IAM account. So I need to provide them over here, and this is coming from my environmental configuration file, which just to recall, like in the previous module we discussed that don't expose your credentials in your env file. Like, don't commit your .env file, have a .env.example file, and commit all of your credentials over there, right? Don't commit them. So yeah, so I'm using Amazon SDK, right? Just an example like how it is being used. So you import your AWS services in your code, you create their instances, and you start using it. So suppose I wanted to use the Amazon Comprehend. So they provide me a method, detect sentiment. So I'll pass their data and they will give me the response and I can use it. So I'll not go too much into detail, but yes, that's how. So basically, yeah, these are the three ways you can access IAM account. There is another fourth way, but that is not recommended, which is the HTTP API. So you can also use IAM to trigger REST APIs, but that is not recommended. Amazon recommends to use AWS SDK. That's why I have not mentioned the fourth one. Okay, so to start with the next topic, which is scalability, I just wanted to highlight some common services which we use for scalability. Before that, any questions, any discussion points, anything anybody wants to discuss or want to ask or need more clarification on? Okay, so Amazon S3 is a service. Okay, so Amazon has, okay, I'll take RDS for example. So RDS is the database management service. So we can create databases in Amazon. So RDS is a service which is Amazon is providing me. Suppose in RDS, Amazon RDS, I am creating my database. I am creating my first database. So that database, when I create my database, so that database will be my resource. Okay. So so services are these things EC2 is a service. Let's say EC2 is a service. Okay. What is EC2? EC2 are our virtual computers that we can create. So EC2 is a service, and you will see resources over here. So when I create my own EC2 server, when I create my server by launching an instance, so that created server will be my resource. Okay, so Amazon EC2 is a service which provides me virtual computers, and when I create my virtual computer, so my virtual computer is my resource. Yeah, there are some services which don't have any resources, like Amazon Comprehend. So Amazon Comprehend does not have any resource. Amazon Comprehend works on API basis. So this is basically a natural language processing. So we directly call Amazon Comprehend using their SDK. We don't create resource for Amazon Comprehend. Like same with Amazon SES also. SES is also like they provide you programmatic access. They don't have any resources that you need to create. Mm-hmm. Yes. So what we can do is that we can create a type of a user that has programmatic access also, and that has a console access also, like management console access also. Both of these are can be done, right? But it is mandatory that in your code, if you want to use Amazon services, you need to create IAM user. You can use root user also, but that is not very risky thing. So I believe you should not use it. Nobody should use it. Right. So it's very good to create your user, provide the service that you want to give it to him, and then just so that even if I somehow suppose I got your credentials from here, and suppose my credentials were for Amazon Comprehend, so even if I want to use this credential for some other service, I won't be able to do that because this AWS account, this IAM account does not have access to other services. It is only restricted to Amazon Comprehend. Even if I get these credentials, I won't be able to use it anywhere. So that is safe because there are some services which are very costly, very costly. Like thousands of dollars can be built up in a month. Those are like that level of costing is there, right? So no. So basically, the root user is responsible for the billing. So, or suppose if your account, Amazon account has 10 IAM users, so whatever those 10 users are using, everything will be summed up and given to this particular billing, like in one billing only. So they don't have separate billings, they just work, and whatever billing is there, the root user or the IAM user that has access to the billing dashboard will be able to see them. Okay, so one billing is there only. Yeah. One account, one billing, but multiple users are there. Mm-hmm. It depends. So while creating your user, you need to define like what is the access type. If you are choosing programmatic access, then in no case this user can log in into the management console. But if you select both of them, so I can log in into my management console also, and I can use my IAM user in programmatic access also. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you as a developer who wants to run the console, so you should have the console access only. And if you are creating your IAM user for program like for your code, then only create a user which has programmatic access only. Like keep them separate basically. It's rarely required that you need programmatic access also and you need console access also. Try to keep them separate. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so if you provide both the access types, so there will be different login for console access and there will be different login for programmatic access. Two set of logins will be there. Okay, I'll show you. Like Vinay user is I'm suppose I'm creating Vinay user and I'm choosing both. And suppose I'm add okay I'll not select password. It will be auto generated. And suppose I'm giving you SNS. SNS for SNS for sorry SNS is for sending SMS push alerts. This is the service for push service and SMS. Okay, and suppose now I'm doing this. Okay, now I'm giving you programmatic access also, and I'm giving you console access also. So what will happen? It will give you two sets of use. It will give you two set of password. So if you see this password, so this password will be used for your console login, and this secret, this access key will be for programmatic access, and you can download this thing. So if you download this thing and open this, it's not okay. Let me open this file in this thing, LibreOffice, because it's a CSV file. So basically, yeah. So your username is Vinay. Your console password is, I mean, the management console password is this one. And if you need programmatic access, so you are provided these two credentials. And if you want to like for your management console login, this is your URL that you can use. Hmm. Yes. Okay, let's show that. Okay. So let me log in using your this thing. After you have created a user, you can again manage that. Like so, if I'm here, so I can add you more permissions also, and I can remove your permissions also. Right. Let's do that. Okay. And I'll also show you one more thing. So now I'm logging into your user. Yeah. So you are also logged in into your my account with your IAM user. If I want to see your billing dashboard, you will see what happens because I didn't provided you the billing access. So you need permissions to do that. Right. That same happens with everything because you don't have like if I try to use SES. Okay. If I want to add domain, so you are not authorized to do that. You cannot do this thing. Why? Because I didn't give you the permission to do so. I gave you SNS access, right? Like again, just one more example, like comprehend. If I want to use Amazon comprehend, you won't be able to do that because I didn't provide you the access. Right? If I do this again, you're blocked because yeah, you don't have the access. But if I go to SNS, you will have the access of SNS. Okay, let's do one thing. I created S3 buckets, right? One more thing I'll show you. Okay, on my S3, I have two buckets, right? So let me give you. Okay, let's go to S3. Which is again, I'll see some error that okay, you don't have anything to see. Yeah, you don't have permissions. So now suppose I am in your account and I am giving you some more permissions. So let me add a permission, and I am attaching policy. So let's say S3. I want to give you S3 permissions, but I will configure them. I'll not give you every access, but I'll come to the Amazon S3, and okay, this is for full thing, right? Okay, let's not choose this. Let's say uh, S3. Okay, okay, so we were here, right? Okay, so if I need to give you, okay, just a minute. I'll start again. So here I am, Vinay. Oh, okay, and one more thing. If we see this list over here, na, so you will see, okay, this was used when it was used. Like this is the access key age, which is when was the your these credentials were created. What is the password age? So this helps us to track back like when was the last time that you were logged in into your account, or when did you use this key to do some programmatic access. So here I was like, I want to add some permissions to you. So right now you don't have any S3 permissions, but I'll add you now. I want to give you the policy, this S3 access, but I'll create a policy for you, right? Because in my S3 I have two resources, but I don't want to give you the two resources. What I will do, I'll choose a service S3, and in my S3 I'll give you the listing facility, but not for all the resources. I'll give you the specific resources. Which specific resource? I'll take this up and copy the ARN over here, and ARN. I'll pass my ARN file over here and add over here. So out of my thousand of buckets, imagine you have thousand of bucket. For Vinay, I'm only giving you access to this bucket only. So I've given you the access. Now finalizing this thing, I need to Vinay S3 access. Then I'm creating this policy. Okay, now my my policy has been created. Now again I'll have to go to my users, choose Vinay, add permission, policy section, and filter up by my custom policy. What is the custom policy? This is my policy. Review and add. Okay, now this user has S3 access but only limited access. Now if I come here and refresh this thing. Okay, unknown error. Okay, let's refresh the page. Uh, it's still in the process to provide you the access. That's why it is there. But once you have the access, so out of these two, you will have access to one, but not both. Right. Yeah. It's basically called eventually AWS eventually consistent. You can read about it. Eventually consistent. So what happens is that whenever we are doing anything in Amazon, so they have multiple data centers. So what Amazon does is that whatever you do from one data center, they copy the data to other data centers also. So Amazon says that it is eventually consistent. So that means whenever you save something, they do not guarantee this thing that okay, as soon as you hit the save button, this thing will be ready to use. But because they copy stuff from multiple data centers, so eventually you will be provided the access. So right now this is what is happening. So it gives you access. Okay, somehow because somehow you got the access to list all the buckets, so that's why you are having this. But listing bucket permission and these things are only limited for this bucket, my first bucket Varun. So you can list out items from this thing, but you can only access this thing, right? So you don't have permission over here. But if I go on this one, so I can see over here. Okay, yeah, that's there. I right. Okay. Yeah. So also read about this once, like eventually consistent. I'll provide some links over here on this file. After this session, I'll definitely share this PPT with everyone so that we can have a review on that. So the other topic today was scalability. So what happens is that whenever we develop an application, that is one thing. But deploying that on Amazon or any other cloud and making it possible that suppose like WhatsApp. So we guys can imagine, right? How much load WhatsApp has. Like every second, how many lakhs, millions of users are using WhatsApp every instant. So for that, we need scalability. Right. So what is scalability basically? In simple words, the ability to shrink or grow in size and capacity to fulfill the load demands at a particular time. That is called scalability. Just an example, like we all use G Suite, like Gmail, and you remember like few days back, like when the whole Google Cloud was down, right? So within minutes, this news that Google went down was like all over the internet. Everybody knew about it. Why? Because everybody is using it. Because everybody is using it, it is a scalable application because millions of people are using it in a minute, like every instant. So there are thousands of servers that are running concurrently to power up Google. So that is scalability, like to deploy your application, to manage your application on AWS such that even if there is one user or 10 crore users, your application will still be able to perform, right? Because every server has a limited capacity. And another good example will be the CBSE website. Like on the result day, we all have seen that the CBSE website goes down, right? We all have seen that. So why does that happen? Because CBSE servers are limited, and at a particular time instant, a lot of users are hitting their servers. Because their architecture is not well scalable, that's why their service go down. And take an example of like Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, YouTube. So millions and billions of users are using it every instant. So they are highly scalable. So we can achieve scalability using Amazon. So that's why Amazon provides you all these services so that we can create our services, we can deploy our applications, and they are scalable, right? So to start with the scalability thing, I just wanted to highlight some of the key, like the very important services that Amazon provides that we use in scalability. Like for compute, I have also added the link so you can study more about the compute services. So compute services are basically the server related services. Like we can use Amazon EC2 to create our virtual servers. We can use Amazon Lambda to write serverless code snippets. So you can write a code snippet to send an email. That is not the part of the whole application, but you can create a self-sustaining application like a small one file code snippet that handles your sending email. Elastic Beanstalk is another one service in the compute group. So you can also see that over here. So in the compute thing, you will see all these services that Amazon provides in compute section. Then storage. Storage is for file storage basically. So for storage, again, Amazon has a lot of services available, but I've just highlighted a few of them. Like Amazon S3 is scalable object storage service. Scalable by means like if you have a file of 2 MB, that's fine. If you have a file of 100 GB, then also Amazon will be able to manage it. So scalability is that. EBS, EFS, I'll not waste too much time over here, but you can read about it, right? Just go to this link and you can learn about it. We will actually learn about these, but not in today's session. In the upcoming sessions, we will go deep into it. Then for database, we have Amazon Aura. So this is a AWS. So AWS has customized their own RDBMS, like the relational database. It is just like MySQL or PostgreSQL, but it is engineered by Amazon, and they recommend that you should use Amazon Aura. Then RDS, another service that they have, like Amazon RDS is so if you have a database, so you can deploy it on Amazon RDS and they will take care of that. I'll go in details of all this in the next sessions, but just wanted to highlight this thing, right? Okay. So the other point I wanted to highlight is the scalability. For scalability, I have mentioned this article. You should go and read this article once. So let's see how we can architect our AWS to achieve scalability. Before that, I just touched upon scalability very briefly. Do every one of us understand what is scalability, or should I go deep into it and let's discuss more about scalability? Right? Okay. Anybody else wants to understand deeply what is scalability? I think no. So, yeah. No, right? Okay. So let's see how we can architect our projects. For example, so we, like me, Abhishek and Vinay have worked on a project, PartRunner. So I'm taking example of our own project. So PartRunner is our own, like something that we created last year. So this is our own Crown Stacks project that we worked on. Like it has a front end, it has a back end. The back end is written in Laravel PHP and the front end is written in Angular. Okay, so now when we were on that date that okay, we need to deploy this on AWS. So what we did, we had to decide like how to deploy that. So there are a lot of models to deploy our application on AWS. This is the least scalable model, like the least scalable setup. What is that setup? You create an EC2 server. You deploy your front-end website over here. You deploy your back-end website over here. All the files that will be uploaded by the customers, because this application has a support that so they have drivers, they have customers. So they upload their files. So whatever the people upload, we'll also store them in the EC2 server. And we are connected with a database, MySQL database. So that database will also be installed on the EC2 server. This is basically what we do in our current setup, like on the Crown Stack, the dev server that we have right now on Crown Stack, that does the same thing. This is the least scalable setup. I think everyone knows the dev server of Crown Stack, right? So they do that, right? They host their backend over there, they host their front end over there. All the file uploaded will be hosted on that server only. All the database that you are accessing on the dev server and installed on that dev server. The risk is that, suppose, let's take the uploaded file. Suppose your application has like people are using your applications and they are uploading files, right? So every EC2 server has limited storage. Okay. So whenever you are creating your EC2 server, So whenever you are creating your EC2 server, you need to tell Amazon like how much space do I need. I'll not create an EC2 server right now, but I'll show you quickly. Let's launch an instance. Okay, so whenever we launch an instance, we create an EC2 server, we tell Amazon like, okay, I need 30 GB of space from you. Suppose your 30 GB space got exhausted. What you will do? Your application will crash. Okay, because nobody else will be able to upload their files and your APIs will start giving error. And because of that, your front end will start giving error and your whole application will fail eventually. Okay, then what's with the database? Again, database is highly critical for every application. Now, when it comes to MySQL, when hosted on EC2 server, this is my personal experience. I have done this mistake in my past. So if I install my database on an EC2 server, as soon as my database size grows to about 1 GB, the EC2 server will crash up. Okay, that's a guarantee. And to show you that, I'll show you the real database of this part runner. So as soon as your database, which is hosted on your EC2, grows to the size of 1 GB, your EC2 will crash. I'll not go into detail why it crashes, but that's for sure. Because MySQL, the database is a very heavy service. As your database grows, the load, the computation, like the processor on the EC2 has to work more. And by 1 GB, your EC2 server, the processor that you attach with EC2 server will crash out. That's for sure. So if you see the part runner, which I am showing right now, so this is where we store the data of part runner, the whole application. And if you come down over here, you will see right now we have only 881 MB of this over here. But in part runner, we have two databases. So in part runner, we engineered it such a way that we maintain two databases. So the other database, if you see logs database, so you will see like it's 14 GB size. Right, we have about on this particular one table, only in this table we have like all these like more than 30 lakh of records over here. Just imagine if 30 lakh records are there in your EC2 server, it will definitely crash up. And when this crash, everything crashes and your application will not be scalable. Like your application will fail up. Right, so that's why scalability is required, so that you can safely say that okay, whatever I have deployed, it will work even after 1 year, because the database file will always grow. The uploaded file will always grow. There is no chance that the uploaded file will become less. Coming to the backend, whenever you are working on it, even your code will also grow. Okay, and same happens with the front end also. So whenever we are working on it, these things will grow up. Right, so storing them on one EC2 will fail. What we have done right now on part runner. So this is what we have done on part runner right now. I have mentioned it as somewhat scalable. It's not totally scalable, but this is somewhat scalable. Why we choose that? Because firstly, we don't have any dedicated DevOps right now, so that we can ask them to create an architecture like this. I'll show you. We created ourselves. And secondly is billing, because everything that you do has to do with billing. So you need to make sure that whatever you are doing, whatever architecture you are planning for your client, you ask them what is your bill limit, right? You cannot do something like that the client will pay thousands of dollars. They'll just complain about you and the whole project will shut down in a month. So this is somewhat we did for part runner. What we did is that on the EC2 server, we are hosting our front-end website, we are hosting our back-end website on the EC2 server. We moved our database to Amazon RDS so that it is individually scalable. So even if this is coming from Amazon RDS. Okay, if you want to see this, you will see over here, like what is the server running over here. So this is basically the RDS server that we created on our client, for our client. So that's why, that is the only reason I am able to create a database that has 14 GB of size. Otherwise it would have crashed on the EC2. So now just imagine if your database size is growing to and is growing and growing, and let's say even if it is like 200 GB, it won't matter, because Amazon RDS is a service which is specially engineered for your database management. So they know how to manage a 200 GB skill. They know how to manage a 200 GB database and even more. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes, we need to configure our backend, because I think front end does never connect with the database, but backend does that. So what we do, so we need to code our application also in that way, right? Okay, only Amazon cannot do everything. We also need to plan it out. Like our code was written in such a way, like if you see on the part runner side, so this is our project. So what we did for part runner, we so these are the two database configurations. So this is my computer configuration. So on my computer I am accessing my local database, which is hosted on my local host. But on the production, I have given the connection string of my RDS. So my backend application, which is hosted on EC2, it has connection to the database Amazon RDS. So whenever we are using Amazon RDS, so Amazon RDS will provide you the connection string that you need to import on your there. No. Yes. Yes. So Amazon RDS will take care of the scalability. You just need to create a database in Amazon RDS, connect your Amazon RDS with your backend application, and then the database you don't need to worry about. Okay, Amazon RDS will scale it up automatically, right? And we have just chosen the the smallest plan over here. If you come to Amazon RDS service and you see this over here, so these are the database engines that Amazon provides. So Amazon Aura is what Amazon has engineered themselves. PostgreSQL is one of the databases. MySQL is one. This is MS SQL Server, Oracle, MariaDB. So it supports all of these things. So what it does is that, I'll show you the pricing plan over here. So suppose if you are using MySQL, so they guarantee, like, you just give your database to us, we know how to do it, how to manage it. They know it, and they don't just manage it on the size. Suppose if there is some bugs, like suppose in your MySQL has like your MySQL has a new version coming up. So suppose after 2-3 months you have MySQL 8, MySQL 9. So Amazon RDS will automatically upgrade your database for to use the latest database. This thing, right? Okay. So yes, in the backend application you need to have a connection string that connects to the Amazon RDS. And then we used for file uploads, we use Amazon S3 bucket. So again, Amazon S3 bucket is the scalable solution to store your files. So we moved our user uploaded files from EC2 server to Amazon S3 bucket, so that even if this after, let's say, 5 years, the users have uploaded, let's say, 500 GB of files, it's fine. Our backend application will be happy to do with it, like deal with it. So what Amazon S3 does is that for every uploaded file, they provide you a URL. So instead of so you will use their Amazon S3 URLs in your applications. So that's what we are doing over here. If you see this thing, let's say over here, drivers. So when creating drivers, so we have given the facility to the drivers to upload their photo. So you see all these photos are there. So where are these photos stored? These photos are stored on Amazon S3. And if you see this URL, So you will see that, okay, this is some URL, and what kind of URL it is. So you will see this is Amazon S3. So we have uploaded this file on Amazon S3, and and we are directly using this Amazon S3 URL on our application. Hmm. Yes. So in Amazon S3, you can decide, like, so whenever you are working with Amazon S3, you can decide the permission of what permission this file has. So it's not always public. You can configure it yourself. Like, suppose I'll just show you one quick demo of this. So I'm uploading a file on S3. So that's how we have somewhat scalable. So the good thing is that suppose our EC2 server crashed, even then my database is safe, my uploaded files are safe. For EC2 server, I have my front end code on my GitHub, so I can again create another EC2 server and I can start my EC2 server there. Same happens with the backend. I have my backend code on my GitHub. I can pull that code on a fresh EC2 server and I can just make that work again. Right. Coming to this, suppose if your this EC2 server has crashed, your database is gone, your uploaded files are gone, you can still, like, you will have the code of these two things, but these two are lost forever. So we achieved this scalability because of the limited budget of our client. We use this kind of an architecture over here. And let's say, so this is my S3. So suppose I want to upload some photos over here. So Amazon S3, again I'll repeat, Amazon S3 is to store your files. So suppose I'm uploading these 3 files over here. Okay, it's fine. Okay, now I'll hit the upload button over here. When I do that, yeah, it's uploading. And okay, it has uploaded 3 files. And I can close this wizard over here. So now you will see it's something like file folder structure kind of thing. So just imagine this is a folder. If you go inside this folder, you have these 3 files. And again, you can just take this up, you can delete, and do a couple of stuff like copy, move, all those things. But if you click this thing, so if you see like ARN, so Amazon provides ARN for everything. So even this file has an ARN attached to it. See, internally we use ARN, like Amazon uses ARN, and this is the public URL of this file. Okay, this one. So I've just copied it and I paste this up. So if I paste this up, Amazon S3 is showing me that access denied, because by default whatever files goes on S3 are private to me. They cannot be publicly accessible. If I want to make this thing accessible, so I need to manually do it. Like, if I need to go it over here and make public. I need to explicitly tell Amazon S3 to make this thing public, and Amazon will give me warning that you are going to make this file publicly read access, like publicly read. Okay, I am okay with it. I am making this public. Okay, my this user does not have any permission. Okay, I logged in using, I think, my root account or what. Okay, let's see. Okay, my user does not have permissions to do this. Okay, that's cool. Okay, I think I logged in from my IAM user or I'm not sure which one. Hmm. This last time I'm doing this. Okay. Seems like my root account does not have permissions to do this because I think because while configuring IAM user for Vinay, I gave him the permissions. So it's possible that okay, the root user might not have the access to everything. Okay, so I don't have permissions, but again I can go to my IAM account. Oh, sorry, I don't have an IAM account because I'm using my root user. So that's also a good thing to know that yes, if you can you can restrict the access of your S3 bucket to some users. So Vinay has the access of it. So I'll not go deep into it, but yes, okay. So Vinay's account, if I log in into using Vinay's account, I can change the permission. So when I change my permission, so this error what I am seeing right now, access denied, that won't come. So I will be able to see that image like here, this one. So this is the manual thing. Now you will ask, okay, this is very tedious task to do. Like we cannot do this manually for everything. So that's why what we did is that all these files are being uploaded by our backend code. So while giving our backend while writing our backend code, while uploading this file, we explicitly chose that okay, whatever file is it, I want to attach I want it to be publicly readable. So that's why this file is being readable, because whenever I was uploading it using my backend, while creating this file, I explicitly told Amazon S3 to please make it publicly read. So this is programmatic access to Amazon S3 and telling Amazon S3 that okay, this file is public read. If you comment this out or in your code, if you are managing this, so you can create private files also that only you can access or only some users can access. Okay, is that fine? Yeah. Now, there is one more kind of setup that we didn't do, but that's possible. I will mark it as a good scalable setup where on my EC2 server, I'm storing my front end website, I'm storing my back end website. So there is also so there are many architectures possible. Okay, there is no one ideal architecture for everything. Based on your use case, there are multiple architectures that are possible. So for every project is different, every project's architecture will be different. So for PartRunner, if I were to architect it for the maximum scalability, how I would have done it, I am showing this in this diagram, where the front end website is not stored on my EC2 server. Amazon S3 provides static website hosting. So if you go to AWS S3 static website, so Amazon tells you you should host your websites on Amazon S3 because Amazon S3 will be scalable for that. So suppose if 10 lakh users are working on your website, so Amazon S3 is scalable. So it will automatically scale your website to manage all those 10 lakh users in a minute. In that particular time instance. So the best solution would be to host the front end on an Amazon S3 bucket. Then having a load balancer. Again, we will touch up more on the next, whenever we are doing the compute wala session. But load balancer is something for your backend application. So suppose, suppose 10 million users are hitting your backend at a particular instance. So one EC2 server cannot handle all those requests concurrently. So what we do is that we have something called load balancer. So this load balancer acts as a manager based on the load, like how much load do you have. It automatically creates EC2 servers and distribute your load on multiple EC2 servers. So if you have 10 EC2 servers running, so your request will be distributed to 10 EC2 servers. Every EC2 server will be running your backend application. The identical backend application will be multiplied to 10 EC2 servers. All those EC2 servers are created, and Amazon load balancer also create new server. They can reduce your servers also. So suppose in morning time, suppose you only have 10 users, so only one EC2 server is enough for them. In suppose after like 2 p.m. you have 10,000 of users coming into your application. So Amazon load balancer will automatically create 10 EC2 server, and they will distribute 10,000 users into 10 servers by giving 1,000 requests to every EC2 server. Right. So Amazon load balancer is used for that. I'll touch that, but on some other session, not in this session. So I would have hosted the backend on auto scaling EC2 servers, attaching it with a load balancer so that it will automatically manage the backend. The backend application is again connected with the Amazon S3 bucket for the uploaded files, and it is also connected with Amazon RDS. But before RDS, we have a database caching service. So because for every query that we run on Amazon RDS, Amazon charges us, right, for every database query that we run it. And for this particular project, if you will see the database size, I mean not the database size, the number of tables that we are having. Just a second. So in this project, we have 175 tables. So whenever we are querying database like this, a lot of cost is coming because of RDS, because we are using Amazon RDS compute power to run those queries. So to query faster and to reduce our cost, we would have included an Amazon Elasticache. So if you come to Elasticache, so this is basically something that you put behind your database. So it caches your most common queries, so that whenever you are running those queries again and again, you don't have to go to Amazon RDS. Elasticache will process that query locally, and it will automatically return you back that thing. So you are saving your time, you are saving your costing using Amazon RDS. Again, Elasticache has also cost involved with it, but it's still faster than and much cheaper than using Amazon RDS for everything. Right. Now, I would have also used Amazon CloudFront. So CloudFront is basically CDN. I hope everyone knows CDN. If not, we will touch that on whenever we are doing the front end wala session. But CDN is something. So right now, this file is coming from my Amazon S3. So this Amazon S3 has been created in Ohio region. Ohio region is in US, but I am sitting in India. So the time it takes for this file to load on my computer is a lot longer than if this file was stored on Amazon's Indian servers. So this is something Amazon CloudFront does. It's a CDN service. They have edge servers. So whatever file you upload, they distribute it along their network, and wherever your user is, like if I'm in Africa, so my file will be coming from Africa, not from India or not from US, because coming from Africa will be less time taking, and it will be faster to load. So that's how I would have architected it, so that my front end is auto scalable. So I don't care how many users are coming on my front end website. Amazon S3 will automatically scale this up for me. I don't care how many requests I'm getting for my backend, because my load balancer and auto scaling EC2 servers are automatically handling that up. My Amazon RDS automatically handling my database. I don't need to worry about my database. I don't need to worry about my user uploaded files, because they are being auto scaled by Amazon S3. I have attached Elasticache to speed up my query processing time. I'm including CloudFront to make the website and the files load faster from the nearest location wherever my user is. And just to add an example, so suppose this our backend application like this one. So whenever a trip comes, we are sending Slack, we are sending email, we are sending push notifications, we are sending whatnot like SMS, email, Slack. These things we are sending. So right now, all these push notifications, all these emails are being targeted from the EC2 server itself. So Amazon also has a service which is called Amazon Batch. It is a batch processing system. So whenever I need to trigger an email, so my backend will not trigger that email. My backend will command Amazon Batch to do it. So an asynchronous call is being made from my backend to AWS Batch, and AWS Batch will trigger my emails. It will trigger my Slack. It will trigger my WhatsApp. It will trigger my push. So just wanted to include you so that just to show you how we distribute it. Right? There are a lot of things that we can do over here also. Like there are so it depends on like project to project. It depends. Okay, so that's how I would have scaled PartRunner if we were having a budget and I was having a DevOps engineer with me. So that is what DevOps do. They scale your application. We as developers, we just create our application. DevOps is more related to this kind of architectures, and their responsibility to take care of it. Okay, so yeah, so this is AWS Batch. So you just pass your queries over here, like whatever task you want Amazon to do, so it will do it. If your query failed, it will again retry that until that particular thing has gone. And just to see over here, you see this also needs IAM over here. So this also requires you to create an IAM role. Just saw that right now. Okay, so I think that's all about this session. If we have any doubts, so we can take them up now. Anybody has doubts or anything you want to discuss over here? Okay, no doubt right now. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, Amazon CloudFront is also used to give you all these things. So right now, where is this application? So when I load this file, so all these JavaScript file, all these CSS files are coming from our own EC2 server. So this is where our EC2 server is supplying all these things. Sorry, not this one. So CloudFront. So we would have deployed all our CSS images and CSS file on CloudFront, and they would have been loaded from the CloudFront, not from my EC2 server. Okay, so that's it from my side. So if we don't have any doubts, so yeah, we can end this session now.